Ever walk into a library or garden and just, I don't know, feel the atmosphere? George Bernard Shaw, the playwright, he totally gets that.
Mm.
He uses those exact places in his plays, but not just as backdrops. He uses them to say way more than meets the eye. So ready to decode a little of his secret language?
Absolutely. And we're talking about settings so important. They're practically characters themselves, right?
Yeah.
And today we're drawing on some incredible insights from the book, Shaw's Settings, Gardens and Libraries to do just that.
And this isn't just about pretty backdrops, right? This book, it analyzes 8 of Shaw's plays to show how he uses gardens and libraries very specifically to add layers of meaning and to subtly emphasize his themes. We're talking visual metaphors, symbolism woven right into the scenery.
Oh, yeah. He was a master at making you feel the setting's significance. And one of the things I find fascinating is how often gardens, in Shaw's world, expose this hypocrisy that's simmering beneath the surface of, well, particularly British society.
That's so interesting because at first glance, gardens seem so peaceful, so idyllic. Where do we see this darker side of gardens first?
We'll take widowers' houses, for example.
Okay.
The play unfolds in these seemingly perfect English gardens, very much reflecting the character's desire for upward mobility. But as the play progresses, those gardens become really a stage for exposing the dirty secrets behind their wealth. It's like Shaw saying that even the most beautiful things can conceal some pretty ugly truths.
So those perfectly manicured lawns and those vibrant flower beds, they're really a facade. What they represent is more important than how they look.
Exactly. And Shaw takes this concept of hidden depths even further by connecting characters to the land through their names, even if they haven't been near a farm in years.
Okay, I am all ears. Give me an example of how he does that.
Well, look at Mrs. Warren's profession. Characters like Crofts, I mean, his very name referencing a small piece of farmland, and then, of course, you've got Gardner, right? They're all tied to this idea of fenced-in land, despite being city dwellers. They're all caught in this system based on appearances and hidden realities, mirroring that image of a carefully controlled garden.
It's like they're trapped by the very image they're trying to project, bound by social expectations and their own secrets. And it really adds a whole new layer to those seemingly ordinary names. But Shaw doesn't stop there with gardens, does he?
Oh, not at all. And just when you think you've deciphered his garden code, he throws you a curveball with man and Superman. Here, gardens take on a completely different meaning, this time becoming a symbol of Shaw's concept of the life force.
And that play is a wild ride, right?
Yeah.
It's got love, philosophy, a literal trip to hell. And gardens are key, too.
Absolutely. Remember that scene in the garden in Granada where Anne finally confronts Jack and he delivers this very famous speech about the life force?
It's a pretty intense moment, yeah. He's talking about this primal urge humans have to evolve to create something beyond themselves. But what does that have to do with a garden?
Well, Shaw's being very deliberate here. He's drawing this parallel between the life force and the natural world. And what better symbol of nature's power than a garden? I mean, gardens are all about growth, creation, this cycle of life and death.
So while Jack is talking about this abstract force driving humanity, they're literally surrounded by a physical representation of it unfolding around them.
Precisely. And that's not the only powerful imagery in that play. Think about that final scene with Anne lying supine in the garden. It's a really striking image that has fascinated scholars for years.
Now you've really got me thinking. It is such a striking image. What are some of the interpretations?
Well, some believe it symbolizes and surrendering to the life force, right? Embracing her natural instincts. And this surrender, when you juxtapose it against her, previous assertiveness, it leaves this very lasting impression. Shaw is showing us Anne yielding to something larger than herself, and it all plays out against the backdrop of nature's enduring cycle.
Wow. I never would have considered that interpretation before.
Mhm.
But it makes so much sense in the context of the life force. And it strikes me that Shaw's gardens can be idyllic one moment and then this stark reminder of social injustice the next.
That's a great point, and it's definitely something we see in Major Barbara. The contrast between those luxurious gardens that the wealthy characters enjoy and then the Salvation Army shelter's sparse yard. It's a really potent visual representation of that chasm between the haves and the have-nots.
It's a powerful reminder that not all gardens offer the same peace and beauty. Some are stark reminders of the inequalities in society. But let's shift gears a bit from gardens to their intellectual counterparts, libraries. They play an equally important role in Shaw's work, wouldn't you say?
Absolutely. Libraries, they embody knowledge, ideas, the very power of the mind. And just as he does with gardens, Shaw uses these spaces in incredibly clever and revealing ways.
So if gardens represent what lies beneath the surface, what we try to hide, would you say libraries represent what we openly engage with, what we choose to embrace or ignore?
That's a great way to put it, yeah. Libraries often reflect a character's inner world, their values, aspirations. Think back to widowers' houses.
Okay.
The library there, it's filled with these expensive, untouched classics, serving as more of a status symbol than a space for genuine learning.
All for show, right? Like having a fancy sports car you never actually drive.
Precisely. It reveals how the characters prioritize appearances over intellectual curiosity. They want to be seen as cultured and sophisticated, but they haven't actually grappled with the ideas contained within those books.
But a library isn't always about superficiality in Shaw's plays, is it? Like an Arms in the Man, it transforms into this battleground for contrasting ideologies.
That's what makes Shaw so compelling. He can take a single setting, like a library, and just infuse it with entirely different meanings depending on the play.
So how does he use the library to explore those contrasting viewpoints in Arms in the Man?
Well, you have Raina, right. She has this very romanticized view of war and heroism, heavily influenced by the books she reads.
Right. She's totally enamored with Sergius, the dashing soldier
Exactly.
who embodies those ideals.
Exactly. And then enters Blunchley, this pragmatic, anti-romantic soldier, and the library becomes the space where those two opposing worldviews collide. Blunchley's practicality really challenges Raina's idealized vision of war, forcing her to confront the reality behind the romantic facade.
It's fascinating how those books, they almost become weapons in their intellectual duel. And speaking of books as weapons, Man and Superman takes that idea to a whole new level, doesn't it? The book itself becomes a central point of contention, revealing the character's motivations and beliefs.
Absolutely. Ramsden, the embodiment of traditional values, he's horrified by Jack Tanner's radical book, The Revolutionist's Handbook. He sees it as this threat to everything he holds dear.
It's almost as if that book represents a bomb that could shatter their whole world.
Precisely. It embodies this clash between old and new, convention and revolution. Remember when Ramsden just throws the book in the trash?
Oh, yeah.
That action speaks volumes about his character.
Right. It's not just a discarded book. It's this total rejection of everything Tanner's ideas represent.
Yeah.
But libraries aren't always these arenas for intellectual battles in Shaw's work, are they? They can also be places of, well, quiet reflection.
And that's what's so remarkable about Shaw's use of setting. He's constantly challenging our expectations. In Heartbreak House, for example, the library isn't even physically present on stage. But the characters' constant references to books, to writers, it keeps those themes of knowledge and ideas alive just through their dialogue.
So the library's presence is felt even in its absence, like a ghost library haunting the play.
That's a great way to put it. It highlights how deeply intertwined these ideas are in their lives, even when they're not surrounded by physical books.
I'm really beginning to understand how Shaw masterfully utilizes gardens and libraries as these powerful tools for storytelling. But what happens when he combines them? Do they ever appear together in the same play?
They do, and that's when things get really, really interesting. One of my favorite examples is Misalliance. The garden is visible through a glass pavilion, creating this literal and symbolic connection between the interior and exterior worlds.
So there's this visual link between the world of books and the world of nature.
Exactly. And it's not just visual. The characters move between these spaces, their conversations and actions influenced by both. It's as though Shaw is suggesting that our internal lives, represented by libraries, are inseparable from the external world, represented by gardens.
It reminds us that our thoughts and ideas are constantly being shaped by the environments we inhabit.
And the way he uses these settings in Misalliance is really significant in terms of his evolving style, too. Some scholars believe that this play marks a shift towards a more experimental, almost absurdist style in his writing.
How does the setting play into that shift in style?
Well, the setting in Misalliance it's almost dreamlike, you know? Characters, they appear and disappear unexpectedly. They blur the lines between reality and fantasy. The garden and the library, these traditional symbols of order and reason, are almost turned on their heads.
So rather than grounding the play, the garden and library actually enhance that feeling of absurdity.
Exactly. They become part of this strange, surreal world, reflecting the play's themes of chaos and unpredictability. And we can't forget Shaw's masterful use of stage directions either. He creates these really powerful images that just enhance our understanding of the characters and the play's message.
You're right. It's like he's painting a picture with words. What are some of your favorite examples of these visual moments he creates?
Well, in Widower's houses, there's a great one. Blanche is surrounded by those untouched classics in the library, but she's completely engrossed in reading The Queen, this gossip magazine. It's this brilliant visual representation of the hypocrisy and superficiality that we were talking about earlier.
It's like a silent punchline, highlighting the difference between appearances and true intellectual curiosity.
Exactly. But then later in the play, she discovers a book exposing her father's corrupt business dealings, and this discovery becomes this real turning point for her character.
It's like the library itself sparks her awakening.
Precisely. And we see this use of visual storytelling in Major Barber, too. When Undershaft delivers his speech about the importance of financial security, he does so in Perryvale St. Andrews, his meticulously planned industrial town.
And that setting is crucial to understanding his point, right?
Yeah.
It's a place where everyone has a good job, a comfortable home, and access to education and culture.
Exactly. It's a very concrete representation of his belief that poverty is this root cause of societal ills.
It's classic Shaw, challenging us to confront those uncomfortable truths.
And those carefully crafted settings are a key part of how he does it.
Yeah. We've covered gardens, libraries, and even touched on how Shaw's use of settings evolved over time. But for someone diving into his plays for the first time, what's the key takeaway? What should they be paying attention to?
I would say, above all, pay attention to setting.
It's like he's giving us this secret decoder ring to unlock, like, even richer meaning in his plays.
Exactly. And his use of gardens and libraries, it really serves as a blueprint for any writer looking to elevate their craft, you know? He reminds us that even these ordinary places can become extraordinary with a little creativity and insight.
It makes me want to, like, revisit all those plays and look at them through this new lens.
You absolutely should. That's the beauty of Shaw. He always rewards a closer look.
So before we wrap up our deep dive into Shaw's captivating world, what's one final thought-provoking idea you'd like to leave our listener with? Something to ponder the next time they're, enjoying a Shaw play or even just stepping into a garden or a library.
Here's something to consider. How about this? Shaw challenges us to view the spaces we inhabit as more than just, backdrops to our lives. Gardens and libraries, these seemingly simple settings, they're filled with these layers of meaning just waiting to be uncovered. They can be platforms for social commentary, for exploring the complexities of human nature, and even for contemplating life's biggest questions.
It's like he's urging us to pay attention to the world around us, right? To look beyond the surface and discover those stories hidden in plain sight.
Exactly. And that's what makes exploring literature so enriching, right? It allows us to see the world with fresh eyes, to find those hidden layers of meaning in the everyday.
So the next time you're in a garden or a library, take a moment to consider. What stories are these spaces whispering? What hidden meanings might they hold? What secrets are waiting to be discovered beneath the surface?
Those are the questions Shaw encourages us to ask, not just within the pages of his plays, but in our own lives as well.
What an insightful deep dive this has been. A huge thanks to our expert for sharing their incredible knowledge of George Bernard Shaw and his use of symbolism. And to you, our listener, keep exploring, keep questioning, and keep discovering the hidden depths in everything around you. Until next time, happy reading.